Hey everybody, hope you're doing well. This is Tadlock, TNArtist. Just wanted to touch base with you real quick, kind of go over some different things that I'm working on here. So this one's going to be a little bit different because my recording software is just giving me nightmares, and I've tried two different ones. I have one that's my main one that's my backup. Neither one is wanting to work. So I'm going to go over this time lapse from Rebelle 7 Pro and slow it down and try and talk about what I did here. So the first step I did here, which kind of blew past while I was starting the narration, was I used my new bokeh brush that I made it's my ink pen that does these bokehs and puts them on there, and I use kind of a light yellowish color, and I have an 8x10 canvas, and I use this yellowish color to throw it in there, and it'll build overlays on top of itself and make it kind of bright looking. Then I went to Gaussian blur and blurred it about 30% to get this kind of blurred out background. Now, from the next step, what I did here is I took and I made a selection with the rectangle marquee selection tool. Then setting it to add to selection, which I think is the second setting that you can see under the select. I took that and drew some areas around here to make it kind of lumpy, okay? And so that's what I wanted to do, was just kind of break up that silhouette. And then once I did that, I took the gradient tool and I did a gradient and the grayscale, just going this direction like this. So that way I can get kind of the foundation for where my light is going to be. So that's what I was doing here. And then once I got that in there, I kept it still selected, and you can see how the gradient tool is being kind of played around with there. And then I started taking my smooth acrylic express brush. It's actually not mine, it's the one that comes with Rebelle, but took that and started laying over top of it this yellowish color and playing around with it to get it to lay over top and look really nice on there. Now that color is the Naples yellow is what that is. And so I'm using Naples yellow, cadmium yellow, and a little bit of cadmium orange for these colors that you're going to see coming down through here. And then I just overlay them and soften them, and by hitting 4 and blending it. And then I go back with the blending tool itself and really soften it out. Now what you can't tell here is that this is still selected. That's why I'm not having to worry about going outside the edges. You can also select the Protect Transparency, which is the little checkerboard thing that's below the layers. It's on the layers palette, but it's right below there, like where you can change the settings for like multiply and overlay and all that stuff. So that's what I'm doing here, is just kind of laying in the colors. And then once I get these kind of laid in, I'll go back and soften them. Like you can see here. Now that's where it's streaky, that's where I've got it set to 4. If you want to have it more painterly and that kind of stuff, you can leave it streaky. I wanted to get a little bit more softened kind of look to it, so I used the blending tool to blend it out and soften it out so that it's kind of going around it. And I just continue to work on this for a little bit. So you'll see me working on this. Now this is, it's a time lapse, so it's sped up. Even though I've got the time lapse slowed down, it's still sped up to probably about 3 or 4 times the speed that I did it in. But you can see I'm laying in colors and just kind of softly overlaying these. And what I'll do is I'll go with a lighter color, a little bit darker, and then I'll blend them together and smear them over top of that gradient as well. And you can see how that starts to give you that really nice, even kind of a look. And there's some of the cadmium orange. And then a little bit of Indian red right there to kind of give that reddish orange kind of look, because that yellow will turn kind of greenish in the way it looks, which is, it's fine, but I wanted it to be a little bit warmer than that. And then I start adding in more highlights, as you can see here, and that's just going back to the Naples yellow and then bringing the value scale up a little bit, and then from there putting it on and softening it out. Now what you'll see here is you see these light streaks that I've got that I've started putting right here and right here. That's where I took the airbrush tool and I started airbrushing in that light color, and it was set a very low opacity. Started airbrushing in so the candle would have just a slight reflection and give it the feeling of roundness for the cylinder that it is. And then I did the same thing with the darker Indian red. Okay. Now on a new layer, I created, using the same Indian red, I started creating a wick. Okay. So I'll take and create that dark color from down here and pulled it up to here to make the wick, and just kind of a crook shape kind of thing. And then I'll take some of the black and put it in there and smear them together. Then I also, once I get that basic shape drawn, I am then putting it on lock transparency so that I can just mess around with it and not have to worry about, distorting it. So that's what I'm doing here, is laying that in, and you can see there's the black, and then I'll kind of soften them and smudge them together a little bit. Now the next thing I wanted to do, once I had that there, is I'll start building up the flame. So I wanted to have kind of an orangish brown around the wick itself, and then around that I start adding some yellow, and this is the cadmium yellow again, and I start adding that around even more, and then taking the brush, putting it on 4, start softening and spreading it back. Now this is the ink pen that I'm using here, and it's the fountain round and that I'm using. I like using that one or the marker to really get kind of that feel of softening. So I just drew out the flame shape using the light Naples yellow again. And then this is a lot of going back and forth, adding in white, adding in some yellow around the edges, and then softening them back and forth. And I'll switch back and forth between the fountain pen and the blending tool, and really softening these out. And once you get kind of that yellowish soft gradient there, then you can go back and start adding white to the inside to make the flame look really hot and bright. And that's what I started doing here. So I'm adding again with the fountain pen, and then softening it with either 4 or the blending tool as well, and going back and forth, and making sure to go along the edges a little bit as well, so that those get a kind of a wispy softness to them. And so that's what I'm adding in here. And just kind of softening it in and blending it around, and making sure to really get those edges kind of softened right through here that you can see, and then right through here as well. So that way they've really got that nice soft blurring into the area around it kind of thing. So keep adding all those. Now you can see how once we've developed the lighting here for this candle, that's going to imply to the viewer that that's what those lights are in the background. They're other candles just out of focus. Okay, and so that's why I did that bokeh in the background and then blurred it with the Gaussian filter. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking, if you notice right here, you can see where I kind of blurred it with a curl and blurred it with a curl, and I'll do it up here as well. And what that is I'm trying to give the implication of maybe a run going down the side, match up with those bulges that I went in and softened with the selection tool. Now this part right here, what I'm doing is I took the marquee tool, again the selection tool, with a rectangle, and just made a rectangle, did the gray that you see here, then I shit it up with my up arrow, and I added a highlight right there as well, and then I'll shift it back down and add a shadow. And this whole candlestick that you're going to see that I build out here is done really with just playing around with the selection tool with both the circle and the rectangle, to just kind of play around with it. So there I just made a rectangle, filled it in real quick. Now what I did here was, once I had that rectangle filled in, I made a circle that I did right here. And first I deselected the big rectangle, made a circle selection, and pressed delete. Then I scooted it over to eyeballing it about where I thought the next one would be, that it matched up, and then I pressed delete again. Not a perfect way to do it, but for me it's kind of a fun way to do it and just play around with shapes. This was on a separate layer, by the way, from the candle. And so that's what I'm doing here. Anytime you see that there's a shape added like that, or the little circles there, that's me either adding a circle in, like right here, and then scooting it over to right here. and then filling it in. This part right here, to add that, was just an oval that I made, and I tried to line it up, and you can see it wasn't perfect. I was off a little bit here. Tried to line it up with that vertical, and then by doing so, it gives me that feeling of that kind of swooping down of a cylinder kind of base. So then I'll go back and take the marquee tool and clean some of that up. Just like these little highlights here, I wanted to add in the feeling of another circle bead kind of thing in the front. So I just took some of the light gray from up here. Took some of the light gray from up here, and then I put it down here as the fountain pen. And then I just put it on 4 and the blending tool as well, and then blended it out. And just the direction of the strokes and the blending like this. Okay, and then that gives that feeling of that being sunken in and coming around. And the same thing with these beads here. I just wanted to maintain this kind of a shape for my highlight and just kind of build it up that way. And here I am just, excuse me, playing around with the light and dark. So playing around with the lights and the darks to kind of get that shape. And all of these are really just implied shapes. There's not much drawing there. It's just using those softening tools and the blending tool. Same thing for the staff of the candle holder. It's just a cylinder. So just giving it a little bit of a highlight here and there. Blending it around, going back and softening it. Okay, so for this smoke, let me tell you what I'm doing on this. Is I'm taking and drawing with the fountain pen again, set to about 30% opacity. I selected that bluish gray color, which was basically selecting this color here, and then going to the left on my, and clicking on it and going to the left on my color chart that pops up, and selecting a blue that is same value as this, but then it's just kind of a blue-gray. So then the next thing that I'm doing is I'm just going around and adding in some wispy shapes, and because these 30% is here, it gives it some areas where it overlaps and gives you a nice highlight, if you will, and then you just kind of build it up from there. I do grab some of this yellowish color here, this yellowish orange. You'll see that in a second, where I grab that and kind of add highlights to the smoke that's coming up. And so what I do is I'll make the strong stroke, and then I'll take and push 4 and soften the edge on here. And then I'll take the blending tool and soften all of that and kind of fade it out. Okay, so I'm leaving that stronger front side for the most part, and then a softening to the back side, and then a real strong softening to that as it moves forward. So you'll see that kind of happen as we go through this. So just add in some wispy squiggles, thinking about, just how it might flow around and move around, and just kind of keep layering them one on top of the other, not really worried about so much how it looks, okay? Because of the transparency of it and the context, the viewer is going to see it as smoke. And so again, here you can see I'm adding some of that highlight that would be right around the flame. And now I'm taking the 4 setting and softening it, and then I'll take the blending tool and soften it even more from there. And you can play around with the sizes of those brushes to really let you soften it out and almost obliterate it somewhat, kind of like I just did right there. And then you can even go back and erase some of it if you want to give it some crisper edges here and there. So, but just by adding it in and continuing to layer it, and this is one of those things you just want to layer it a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, and it starts to really take on that feeling of a wispy smoke. It's almost like doing fog kind of a thing, but just there's stringier clouds of it, if you will. I decided to do one wispy one over to the side here and give it kind of a feel. And then down below it, I took my cloud brush, which you don't have to use that one if you don't have that one, but if you're a member of Patreon, you should. I'll take that cloud brush, brush it around, and then go back 4 setting and soften it, then erase some of it, come back and soften it, and then add in some streaks that go both behind and in front of the candle holder, so the candlestick. But I think overall this gives a really nice feeling of depth, a really nice playing around with light and shadow and shapes. And that's kind of the reason I wanted to do this, because there's a lot of nice shapes in here. There's the spheres, there's the cylinders, there's the lighting, and just kind of the interesting stuff in the background. But you can get kind of a metallic look by just using some of the darker bluish, really dark bluish gray color, and then adding some of the reflective lights from around it on there to round it out and soften it and so forth. So I hope you'll take a look at this one, give it a try. Let me know if you have any questions at all about any of it, and I'll be happy to answer it. But until then, I'll see you on the next one. Thanks so much for being a supporter.